Muted. Cool. Whoa, we are live on Clubhouse. We are live on Facebook. Welcome to Disrupt Your Week. It's been a little while. As we were talking this morning with my team, we realized that it's been a while since we've done just an open session. Had a lot of topics, a lot of great things to cover. Thank you for all the wonderful feedback from last week's show in terms of the 5 toughest leadership principles that aren't talked about enough. That led to some really rich conversations with some amazing people and heard a lot of great feedback from a lot of you. So thank you for that. In terms of today, got to make sure I can see the comments. Cool. So I've got Clubhouse here on my desktop, like not my desktop computer, literally on my desk. And then I've got Facebook Live running live right now. And today is going to be totally open. So if you're on Clubhouse, you're welcome to raise your hand and ask a question, or even just say, I'd love to hear you talk about this. I'd love to get more insight about this. It doesn't even have to be a constructed question, just a topic that you're exploring or learning more about, or you're just curious about my take on it, with very, very little that's off limits. And then same thing here on Facebook as you're joining Disrupt Your Week, as you're joining this live show that I do every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Jump in the comments and let me know what you'd like to hear about today. What questions do you have? What are you focusing on? What are you struggling with? What is working well? And you'd love to get some insight as to how to continue to allow it to work well long term. So I realize that there's probably some warm up involved in terms of people's comments. And in terms of Clubhouse, anyone wanting to raise their hand and come off and just share a topic they'd love to hear some more discussion about, even some coaching on, working through some things. We can have some back and forth if you're on Clubhouse, or if you have particular questions or topics you'd like to hear about on Facebook. Don't be shy. Get in the comments. But those of you who are watching this for the first time, while I wait for anyone here that would like to hear about something in particular on Clubhouse or on Facebook Live, let me tell you just a little bit about Habit Finder for those of you who are here for the first time. So Habit Finder, we have been in business for about 21 years. We bring a very unique approach with a scientific, mathematical foundation to the intuitive approach of personal development. Now, we don't differentiate very much between personal development and professional development. In fact, one of the things that we've realized is that professional problems are personal problems in disguise, because it's the common denominator is us, and the common denominator is the way we think. That's as much of a denominator as you can get down to the source of the way you are experiencing your life, the results that you're trying to create. It all comes down to the way your brain works. But that gets us into some really interesting paradoxes, into some really interesting counterintuitive, strange places that a lot of us don't spend as much time as we think that you should, experiencing not just what you think about certain things, not just what you think you're experiencing, but what you think about what you're thinking and what patterns are there. That's really what mindset is. Mindset is not what you do, okay? Mindset is not who you are. Mindset, okay, is about how you think. It's about the patterns, okay? And we've got certain patterns that we're working with. Now, we don't have to surrender to those patterns, okay? We don't have to do that. And thank you, Leslie. That's a great place to start. So please feel free, if you're on Clubhouse, if you're on Facebook Live, Leslie just commented in and said, talk about affirmations. And I would love to. So we'll talk about that. If you're on Clubhouse, raise your hand. We'll bring you on stage and let me know what you'd like to hear about, what you'd like to discuss, or a question you might have or something you're struggling with. So, but about these patterns, your brain is built for pattern recognition. That's why Augmandino, and the greatest salesman in the world, and as the official Augmandino company, that's a huge part of our foundational instruction and the tools that we use, said that my thoughts have already marked out a path that threaten to imprison my future. Why? Because all of your thinking patterns are based on your past. They're based on your brain's constant downloading and aggregation of data to try and create the patterns that are going to allow it to predict the future. Because if your brain can predict the future, meaning it's ready for it, your life is going to be safer. Okay, your ability is going to be at its optimal for whatever's coming if you're ready for it, and it's also going to need the least amount of energy. Okay, because it's prepared for it. So that's a really interesting thing to understand and a core of what we're talking about here. The last thing I want to share, and then we're going to dive into questions and comments and thoughts and anything else. Okay, because this is a totally open session. This is for all of you in terms of what we're doing here. And what we want to be able to create is understanding these patterns and what we're doing. And I just forgot what the second point was going to be. So I'm going to take that as a cue to dive right into a couple of the chats that have already come in. Looks like we've got Susie raising her hand in Clubhouse. So I'm going to start with Leslie, then I'm going to come to Clubhouse for Susie, and anybody in Clubhouse that wants to raise their hand and say, hey, I'd love to hear you talk about this, or I've got a question about this, or I'd love to hear your insights or concerns about that, or whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be an eloquently constructed question. So, but let's start with Leslie, front of the line, who asked to talk about affirmations. Affirmations are a pillar of personal development. They're talked about a lot, and they are an opportunity to be able to instill and reveal more of who we already are. See, that's one of the foundations to personal development. Too often, we feel a certain way, we even act certain ways, we experience life in certain ways, and then we think when our external circumstances change that we will feel differently and that we will operate differently. And that's not necessarily the case. In fact, in most cases, it's not. The doubts you feel, the concerns you have at $1,000 a month, for example, if that's where you're at in your business, are going to be very similar, if not identical, with different context, different nuance, when it's $100,000 a month. The doubts and concerns and things you feel living in, paycheck to paycheck are not going to be that different from having an abundance of income. It's one of the illusions that's very difficult to challenge. So what we are doing is we are wanting to break free from the consumer strategic perspective. The consumer strategic perspective is to convince you that you need to consume. There is something you don't have outside of you that you need to consume, you need to acquire, you need to be able to integrate into your life to be able to be successful. And that is the basis of marketing. That is the basis of marketing and sales as it is today, is to leverage FOMO, to leverage inadequacy, to leverage your desire for life to be comfortable and to be easy. And if they can get their hooks in, and we're not immune from that either. Pain is a huge driver in life. We just want to make sure it's what gets the car started and gets us going, but is not the long-term fuel for the trip, because pain has incredible collateral damage to use long-term. Okay, just because it's combustible doesn't mean it's good for your engine. You pour rocket fuel in your car and it might do something amazing for about 5 seconds. But it's often short-lived. Now, affirmations are a great way to be able to get more in tune to reveal who you already are, okay? To reveal more of your best self. And as we're driving through this life, after about 6 years old, it's actually far more valuable to be able to unlearn intentionally than it is to learn intentionally. In fact, that's the majority of what you're doing. Those of you spending time in Audible and reading books and listening to TED Talks and whatever else, is the biggest ahas are usually something that required you to unlearn. Or if you had the aha and you weren't able to implement it into your life, it's often because you had a conceptual aha, but there's still a pattern that needs to be unlearned before you can implement it. And affirmations are a great way to reground us and to reveal. Isn't that interesting? To reveal, to do again, to reveal who we already are. Now, the effect on the brain of having affirmations that are not currently true, in the sense that they are about something outside of you, are very risky. The research has proven that the more things you say that you don't really believe, okay, the more of a rebellious internal battle you're going to create with yourself. And the more conflict you have inside of yourself, the more difficult it will be to grow and unlearn and become better outside of yourself. And so affirmations are an opportunity to be able to connect with your true self. That's why we have affirmations in our coaching program. Each one of the 6 areas of the brain that we map out scientifically and mathematically in the Habit Finder assessment, we have affirmations for, because they are carefully and deliberately constructed statements about who you already are. For example, I am empathetic. It's the very first one in the book. Okay. It's the very first one that we focus on with any client is empathy, is connection. It's the core of connection. And so what it says is, I have a deep and profound reverence for the infinite worth of a human being and value each person as unique and irreplaceable. That's an affirmation. What is not an affirmation is, I have relationships that make me $10,000 a month and I get checks every month that are amazing and I have more money in my bank account than I could ever spend. That's an affirmation that is external. That does not reveal who you already are. That creates a natural fake it till you make it mentality. Now, some of you might read that and be like, I don't have a deep and profound reverence. No, you do. You just may have unhealthy habits of thinking that make it very difficult for you to access that. But that's a different thing. That's the reason for the reveal. So there are statements of manifestation is what they'll probably be called, okay, which falls under the category of what my dad and I call millionaire magic doctrine, where it's all about manifestation through intention rather than through work, and through which is interesting, considering to manifest means to attack with your hand, which to do the work essentially is what that means. So it's an interesting piece in terms of doing that. But what we want to understand is we are revealing who we already are so that the results, so that the tasks, so that the connections, the people that come into our lives and that we come into theirs become a natural outcome of who we are. That's really the mindset we want to go about, is creating a mindset of growth and learning and unlearning and becoming more of who we already are. Because when it comes to the things that really mathematically matter, not just woo-woo matter, okay, not just new age, that sounds awesome and enlightened matter, but the things that actually mathematically in this universe matter more than the tactics, the strategies, the money, all of that stuff is internal in the patterns of the brain. So affirmations should affirm the patterns in the brain that will allow you to be more successful. If they're about the external, okay, the brain is shown to be able to create an artificial reality that you're going to have to pay the piper for eventually. And a lot of people don't even get out of the garage in those places. Okay, so Leslie just asked a follow up to this particular question. Said manifesting I am statements are a little far fetched. No, you just want to make sure you're very particular about what you put on the end of an I am. This is I am empathetic. I am observant. I am supportive. I am tolerant. I am candid. I am compassionate. Those are things you already are. And those are true, mathematically proven elements of every human being on this planet. But every one of us have patterns in some area that make it difficult. But the challenge is perfect. Leslie, you just gave an example of an external. I sell X dollars and I am a top leader. Well, I would separate those two, okay? Because if you are empathetic, observant, supportive, tolerant, candid, and compassionate, I would call that a great leader, okay? But if you're thinking top leader in terms of the specific rank, that's external. If you're thinking top leader in terms of I am the best version of myself and I want to be able to help other people become the best version of themselves, that's a great definition of a top leader. So we're going to want to be careful. Affirmations should not be wish lists of what some higher power should deliver on our doorstep like it's Christmas morning. Affirmations should be revealing who we currently are. That's what we'll want to be able to focus on. And the value of what comes after I am is priceless. So be very, very particular about paying attention to what you put at the end of that, whether that's I am a 7. Well, no, you're not. You're not a personality. That's just an emotional preset of what you're currently working with. You want to understand it to be able to reveal more of who you are. But as soon as you identify with it, it's game over. Okay. It's impossible. Like saying, I'm not a morning person. Well, what if the mornings are the best time for you to do that? I remember when I had to let go of that about 12 years ago, because with my work schedule and what I do, the only time I could work out is 4:30 in the morning most mornings. So I am not a morning person was not going to support me. Not to mention that had nothing to do with my identity. That has nothing to do with who I am, yet I continued to say that constantly. I didn't need to say I am a morning person, okay? But I got to say I am driven, I am passionate, I am, and then as a natural result, revealing more of who I am gave me an opportunity to peel back the layers on how I wanted to show up in the morning and what habits would support that, okay? Cool. Hope that helps. That's kind of my take on affirmations. We'll keep an eye on any extra messages, follow up to that. But let me bring Susie on board here in Clubhouse if we can. Who has it? Susie, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. And just FYI, we are broadcasting on Facebook Live right now. Just want to make sure you know that. Make sure you're okay with that. Okay, awesome. Cool. Please go ahead and ask.
Yeah, no, thank you for all the just nuggets of information for free. You guys are just so wholeheartedly sharing. I do appreciate that. My question has to do with consistency because that's a personal struggle of mine. And I know that it, I'm sure, has to do with just patterns in my brain. And I probably do need some I am statements attached to that in a positive aspect. But I just really, really struggle with consistency when it comes to like my social media, for example. I cannot consistently follow through on these things that I really want to do. And I have the knowledge, I have the ideas, but the follow through just really, it fails, it lacks. And I really want to change that. I'm just not sure what that missing component is or what you could speak into that I'm sure I'm not alone when I say consistency is such just a stronghold in my life and holding me back from so many things and so many people I can serve and sharing my passions, because I'm not driven by money and labels of, hierarchy in a business. I just genuinely do want to help people, but I feel like my consistency is just so poor, as embarrassing as it is to share that, but I do want to grow and get better.
Got it. Okay. Awesome. Multifaceted request, which I love. There's several things I want to unpack there. The first place I want to start, Susie, is with the actual affirmation in the Habit Finder Practicum. That is, I am consistent. You want to hear it?
Please.
It is, I embrace structure. I manage interruptions and wasteful distractions in order to maintain schedules and keep my commitments. I want to read that one more time because there's some really key things in there. I am consistent. I embrace structure. I manage interruptions and wasteful distractions in order to maintain schedules and keep my commitments. Now, first thing I want to point out, Susie, is what's not in that affirmation. Okay?
Okay.
I'm going to read what's not in there. It doesn't say I am consistent. I am perfectly structured. And I have completely removed interruptions and wasteful distractions in order to have a Loctite schedule and never break any commitments ever. You hear the difference?
Yes.
Okay. That right there, the difference between how those two were said is the difference between what consistency really is and what your brain actually interprets it as. Your brain typically assumes that consistency is constant. That is perfect and unrelenting. But it doesn't say I will have perfect structure. It says I will embrace structure. I will wrap my arms around it. It's not going to be perfect, but I will connect to it. That's what we mean by embrace, the way you wrap your arms around someone heart to heart, cheek to cheek, and you can connect with that person. That's what we want to do with structure, because if you don't have a deeper connection with why you're doing something, then the next part is going to be very difficult. I will manage interruptions and wasteful distractions. I will manage them, meaning I will not be able to get rid of them. I will be able to manage them well. And can you imagine being a boss and hating your employees? How well is that going to work out for you, Susie?
Not well at all.
So tell me how you feel on a given day. How do you feel about interruptions and wasteful distractions?
Frustrated. And frustrated with myself and just my perfectionist personality, and I just end up super frustrated, I guess, because I want to do things perfect, and interruptions it's like I have ADD or something. Like, go start something and then get interrupted and end up somewhere else, and then 2 hours later I'm still back at something I wanted to do and accomplish, and it just leaves you super frustrated and defeated.
So therein lies the first thing you're going to want to start to be curious about, are your expectations for consistency. Okay. An expectation, when we break down the term, is a concrete condition for happiness. Concrete. That's not flexible at all, right?
Right.
So if that's your concrete condition, and it is directly tied to whether you feel you are worthy of happiness, and you don't meet that concrete condition, what happens to your happiness?
You don't have it.
You don't have it. And since you and I both know you can't be perfect, you said the term perfectly, Susie, you are defeated.
Yes. Yeah. It's like no grace for yourself. And
exactly.
Kind of part of what I'm preaching is to have grace with yourself. And then I don't even have it with myself. So, wow, that's huge. Thank you.
Yep. So the next time you run into your next interruption, your next battle with ADD, which does not need to be a battle. That is a superpower, by the way. I know far more massively successful entrepreneurs with ADD than I know ones that don't.
That's good to hear.
Okay. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But just when we get rid of the concrete, we become more flexible. So rather than, I was planning on making calls for the next 2 hours, and now I have to go do this, and it's only been 30 minutes, versus, oh, sweet, I got 30 minutes of calls done. Time for me to switch gears and take care of my kids or take care of this problem I wasn't planning on, and be totally present with that and celebrate the opportunity to do that. And then let's come back and see what kind of time I can create later. You're not going to be very excited about creating time later if all you did was just run into a massive wall of concrete right into your forehead because you didn't get the 2 hours you were planning on.
Right, that's so true. And then that will then just lead into more consistency, is what you're saying?
Yes. The fear is if you give yourself grace, you'll become complacent and a loser.
Yeah.
That's the fear. That's how the brain, the all or nothing brain operates. Oh, if we don't beat ourselves up, we're going to get stuck here. Which is interesting because most people get stuck because they beat themselves up.
Oh, so true. You're preaching it. Thank
Cool.
you. Very cool.
So spend some time thinking about your relationship with your interruptions and your wasteful distractions, and see if you can see them as employees that you'll want to have grace for. And you'll want to manage them like a good boss rather than just be pissed and fire them. And now you're left to do everything by yourself, and you're depleted because you just spent the time whipping yourself.
Yes.
So start there. Then you're going to clear the runway, Susie, to start to go into the next piece. And that is, why am I doing this?
Oh, yes.
Because if you're making some intellectual assumptions about why you're doing social media, it's not going to last. You have no deeper reason for the consistency other than it makes sense. It makes sense is not mathematically significant enough to drive you against unhealthy patterns, not long term.
Right. So what are the deeper reasons you list for social media?
You tell me.
For myself, I wholeheartedly want to share what I'm learning with all of my health and wellness is my passion, serving women, and just I feel like that's like a ministry and a calling and a passion, and just sharing so many truthful things on wellness that people just will not find from your average doctor visit or Dr. Google. It's kind of the deep-rooted functional medicine stuff that needs to get out there, and I'm doing a poor job of sharing it right now.
Okay. Have you had anyone use your services or sign up with you?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Then you're not doing a poor job.
Thank you. Okay.
If you've gotten one person to be able to open up to having an impact, allowing you to enhance their life through value, real value, then you don't ever get to say I'm doing a poor job.
You're right. The value should be in people, not numbers. And that's huge.
That's not true either.
No? Oh.
They can coexist. I'm so glad you said that because it's the last piece I wanted to unpack with you, Susie.
Okay.
I want you to listen very closely, and I want you to process the ping that I'm sure it's going to hit in the nerves. Everyone is driven by money. Everyone is driven by recognition of some kind. What we don't understand is that it drives us all differently. It doesn't mean it drives you in the fast lane headed on the freeway, but it will drive you somewhere. Whether it's you wasting energy trying to pretend that it's not driving you in any way. Okay. Susie, do you have any kids?
I have 3.
That's like pretending you don't have a favorite kid. It's just not true. Okay.
Right.
Doesn't mean you have to give in to its influence. Okay. You can have a favorite kid, but be like, okay, my brain has a favorite kid today. But that doesn't mean I'm going to love them any differently. That doesn't mean I'm not going to nurture them any differently. But if you don't acknowledge some of those thoughts, like being driven by money, you're not going to have any idea what it's doing to you unconsciously. You're going to be suppressing parts of you. And also, there's deeper thing. Money is like the coolest mirror on the planet. Rank and recognition is the coolest mirror on the planet. It's a great indicator that you are helping people. There are very few companies out there where, and entrepreneurship in general, where money is not an indicator that you're doing a good job.
True.
Money was even an indicator that Mother Teresa was doing a good job. If she wasn't all about the money, we would have no idea who she is. Did you know Mother Teresa raised $114 million personally to do what she does, what she did?
No, that's amazing.
Yeah, she was a ferocious fundraiser. No qualms about money and demanding it from people. She knew money drove her. It just got to drive her and add to her deeper mission.
Right.
It wasn't the acquisition of money for selfishness. But it was honoring the energy of it and the access that it gives. And I don't mean I don't love money. I just love what it allows me to do. Okay, cool. That's whatever you need to say to yourself. But the cleaner and clearer of a relationship you can have with money. Money is not something we chase. It is not something we acquire. It is something we build an environment for, and it moves in. And if money was walking by your house tonight and heard you going, yeah, I don't care about money. Money doesn't drive me. Money's not going to want to come stay with you.
So true.
On the other side of the scale, if you're sitting there going, I need money or I'm never going to be good enough, that's a different conversation. Okay.
Right. And so remove any guilt about wanting to earn.
We're not going to let your perfectionist jump back in here after we just had that great conversation. You're going to manage your guilt.
Manage the guilt. Got it.
Okay. Because you need it. That guilt is going to keep you from going off the deep end of being totally vain and totally materialistic. You'll always be a little vain and a little materialistic. You don't want to kick them out of the car of your life, but just don't let them drive it. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense. Thank you so much. This was great. This was really helpful.
Cool. Thanks for the fun topic. That was great.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome.
Bye.
Okay, cool. Did I miss anything in the chat? Just looking to my team. Are there questions about what? If you can put it up on the screen. Perfect. Awesome. Okay. So, and then if you're in Clubhouse as well, feel free to raise your hand. This is totally open in terms of questions, topics. You don't have to have an eloquently constructed question. It could just be, hey, talk about this, or hey, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Lynette says she's with a company called Optavia. Struggle with answering cost questions when a client is shocked at the price. I know I need to see it worthy, but trying to get my mind right. Ooh, this is a great question because this has nothing to do with the client. This has nothing to do with their concerns with money. It has everything to do with your concerns triggering their concerns. Because if we're worried about what it costs, if we're worried we're going to hear it, we have this pesky / amazing part of our brain called mirror neurons. It's in the amygdala. and it's the fastest firing neurons in the human body. They fire faster than anything else, and they communicate with each other in terms of human beings. There's even research that shows that they can communicate with each other through long distances. Like you could be on Zoom and your mirror neurons can interact with each other. You can be on the phone and your mirror neurons can interact with each other. And they have influence. They don't have control, but they have influence over how you're connecting with somebody else. Okay. And that impact, if we're going into it with an overly aggressive, and I mean overly aggressive because you're never going to be perfectly pure, but an overly aggressive, like I need to get this person to pay my bills, or I've got to get this person to hit my rank, or whatever it might be. And that's in our brains, and we don't take time to work through that and process it. And even worse, we feel guilty about it, so we try to suppress it and pretend it's not there, which is like pretending to, which is like getting a sliver and never taking it out. May not be that bad right now, but in a few months you're getting your finger amputated. And so as we go through this, it's going to be a lot more about focusing on what matters. So Lynette, my recommendation would be to focus less on the information and the details of what you provide. Because the more we focus on the features and benefits, the more cost has everything to do with it. And it is a very shallow and very difficult game to play unless you're a seasoned, manipulative salesperson, okay? Which there's plenty out there that are good, like they're great people and they connect and they really serve. There's people out there who have used the alchemy of sales to sell ketchup popsicles to people in white gloves and ice to Eskimos. Like you can sell anything. That's terrifying. If you talk to someone who says, I can sell anything, run away, okay? If they say, I can sell anything that I believe in, anything that I connect with, awesome. Because that connection, Lynette, is what's required and is what you want to use as your sorting tool to find out who can connect with that. We do that by listening. We do that by finding people's pain. We do that by empathetically seeking it out, but also understanding that when we empathetically seek out the pain people are experiencing in their lives, that our empathy will sometimes snap back on us and we'll feel like we caused it. So when we find the pain, we want to console it. We want to discount it. We want to give them a deal. We want to do all these different things. Well, all we want to do is hold space for it. Because if you make it about the pain, if you make it about where they're really living, what they're really experiencing, what they feel when they're talking to you, if it's about what they hear, features and benefits, details, an intellectual, shallow conversation, you're going to get cost even if you're not overly worried about it. But you're playing on a really shallow checkerboard rather than getting to get where somebody actually lives and find out what they dream and desire, what's tough about being them right now, and so on, to be able to go through that. And also, Lynette, I'm pretty sure you've been through what we do, and you're going to want to go back into intrinsic validation. If you are trusting intrinsic validation, not trying to put a cherry on top of an intellectual, detailed orientation, then you're going to be able to get right to the end. And here's a challenge, and this is something we teach when we talk about this particular topic in our coaching, and that is that if you intrinsically validate, if you use the sales arc that we teach that requires a lot more foundational instruction than I can provide today, but if any of you need this kind of conversation on a deeper foundational level, just reach out to us and let's find some ways to get you that information to be able to get you that level of mentorship and coaching. But when you do this right, you don't need to ask people if they want to do something. Do you want to get started? What do you think about doing this? You simply say, let me tell you how this works. Because they already said yes with their pain. And they already were willing to paint a picture, paint a picture of what could be possible because you held space for their pain. And they're going to associate you as the person that could help them get it and get there. So if any of you are running into cost concerns, I know you want to be convinced that it's because they really can't pay for it. Okay. But I've been around way too long and seen way too many people figure out astronomically creative ways to pay for something that were really ready for it. So if someone actually can't pay for it, that's not, I can't afford it. That's, I'm afraid to figure out how to afford it. But that's not for you to go and force. Okay. You don't want to force someone to figure out how to pay for something that they're too afraid to figure out on their own, because then you're going to be forcing them to grow. You're going to be forcing them to be mentored. You're going to be forcing them to sell for you. So we want to use price as an opportunity to assess, here's the price of what I have. Is there pain greater than that? And can I get to it? Because if we make it about features and benefits, we brought intellectual pain into the conversation. But intellectual pain can show up and disappear just as fast, either way. We want to find intrinsic pain. We want to find where they're really living, what's really going on. And any of you are like, wow, I don't want to go give people a disease they don't have. Wesley in Princess Bride summed it up. Life is pain. Everyone is in pain, just like everyone's driven by money, just like everyone's driven by recognition. It's just, how is it showing up? How are they interpreting it? And what kind of an impact is it having? There's a lot of people out there who don't believe in they're in pain because they spend every day comparing themselves to people who seem to be in more pain. So it's like, wow, okay, I'm getting flicked in the ear and that sucks, but that person's getting punched in the stomach every day. So I'm not in pain. No, you are. Getting flicked in the ear doesn't feel good. So we want to be able to connect with our own pain. We want to be able to connect with their pain. That's, admittedly, Lynette, that's the best I can do right now, just considering the current forum, is just make sure we don't buy into the stories of, wow, I've just found the lack of gold mine of people that just don't have money. No, it's a matter of realizing that money and cost has nothing to do with it. It's a cliche, but what is it costing them to not do it is not something you say to someone. It's something you demonstrate to someone. What does it cost you to not do it is not something you say to someone. It is something you demonstrate to someone. And they need to hear their own pain from their own mouth for that to matter enough. In fact, when you can really connect on this level, you rarely get asked what it costs. And you'll get asked what it costs completely different than you're used to. In fact, one of the coolest questions about cost I've heard from the dozens of groups of people, hundreds and hundreds of people I've taught this very sequence to in all different kinds of businesses. One person said, what amount should I expect to see on my credit card statement? They didn't say, what does this cost? They said, they spoke from the future. That's what happens when we get focused on the things that matter more than what it costs, is we want to demonstrate what it's going to cost if they don't. And that's got to come from them. And you've got to be in a place to be able to intrinsically validate them and hold space for that. Okay. Lynette, I'd love for you to jump back in the comments and let us know if that was helpful or if you have any follow-ups to that, that would be helpful to you. Okay. What did you study to know all this shit? Human beings, hundreds of thousands of them. It's really fun for me, Leslie, as you ask. I have in recent years studied I've always been intrigued by psychology. So I've always, Jungian and Freud and all kinds of others, and evolutionary psychology and cognitive behavioral psychology. And I've always dabbled in some of that just because it was intriguing to me. But I've gone deeper formally in that in the last couple of years. And it's just really fun to get into that and get confirmation from people far smarter than me that what we've learned by being able to study the brain on the level that the Habit Finder takes us, with the number of people we've been able to interact with, that we've found truth that required massive grants and research studies. I have access to the brain patterns of hundreds of thousands of people. That's a sample that a lot of top-rated scientists and researchers never get a chance to do. But I also spend hours and hours and hours every day with those people, listening not just to what they're saying, but what they mean. Listening to not just what they're experiencing, but the impact it's actually having. And so that's true of my dad. That's true of so many other Habit Finder coaches, and where we come from is, we have an unfair advantage. We have a completely mathematically and scientifically sound map to the patterns of people's brains, and have been able to learn incredible things from doing that. Okay, next. And just a quick reminder for those of you on Clubhouse, we're also on Facebook Live right now. So please feel free to raise your hand, come out just like Susie did, and just ask a question, or just say, I've been thinking about this topic, curious what your thoughts are. Again, it doesn't need to be an eloquently constructed question. We're going to jump to the next one on Facebook, where Karen says, hi, Paul, tips for someone who struggles with time management, aka structure, and sticking to a schedule. Great question, Karen. I love this one. And the first one is, it's time to take the mascot, the representation, the idol of time management, and kill it. Let it die. You cannot manage time to be managed. Time, tick, 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 time takes care of itself. Let's stop trying to manage time. It's the most consistent, never stopping, never ending measurement in our short human mortal lives. Okay? So with that said, let's kill time management. And let's start where it really matters. Priorities. And one of your first priorities should be to unschedule yourself. That should be a top priority. Now, it sounds nice. Ooh, I'd love to unschedule myself. No, it's very difficult to unschedule yourself. Because when you unschedule yourself, when you require yourself to be a human being, not a human doing, you're going to hear some things. You're going to deal with some things. You're going to face some things that you have been using chaos and busyness and all kinds of other things to avoid. See, that's what's happening here. Is you're managing your time just fine for what parts of your brain want to be experiencing. They're getting some kind of payoff, okay? Karen, they're getting some kind of payoff from the messiness, from the chaos. So we're not going to be able to manage that away. We're going to need to understand what our priorities are and challenge ourselves to touch the timeline of our lives more intentionally in alignment with those priorities. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard this before, that it's not time management, it's priority management. But here's what makes priority management so challenging, is most of our priorities have been heavily conditioned, heavily influenced by who raised us, the schools we went to, the society we were in, the cultural aspects, and they are chock full of supposed to priorities and not supposed to priorities and should priorities and must priorities. And there are always going to be priorities that you don't naturally want to do, okay? Like I am not in love with brushing my teeth, but that's something I probably should do, and I'm not going to talk myself into not doing that. But it's not like my favorite thing on the planet. And sometimes we get into this entrepreneurial haze that, ooh, I own my time now, so I should be able to do whatever I want with it. That's an entrepreneurial nightmare. What we want to understand is there is going to be an appropriate amount of mastery, but there should be lots of room to breathe. One of the keys to structure, Karen, okay, as we start to turn our focus more on priorities, is structure should leave lots of room to breathe. Structure should be like your home or like the office I'm in right now. There's basic walls, a roof, a foundation, and most of this structure that I'm in right now, called an office, 3 stories, is air, is room to breathe, is oxygen. And we know that over 90% of entrepreneurs that we've measured hundreds of thousands of their brain patterns naturally, intrinsically resist structure, especially imposed structure. Like when there are rules that don't seem to make sense, or if there are things we need to do, like going back to Susie about doing social media, if that's just you're supposed to do, even though intellectually we might know that there's more to it, but if we're not connecting to that intrinsically, we will resist it. We will sabotage ourselves without even realizing it, that we're the ones doing it. It's not because that quadrant system didn't work, or that planner you bought didn't work, or that calendar system or that software didn't work. No, it has nothing to do with the software. It has everything to do with the payoff you're getting from the chaos you're currently experiencing. And it has everything to do with usually for a lot of us, our rebellious sabotage to structure. So we want to make sure we add structure slowly. The structure should always be implemented with a very particular question. And that is, does this make my life simpler? And if the answer is no, then don't do it. Don't implement it. And that may require some of you to clean some house, get rid of some structure clutter. Now, the question is not, does this make my life easier? It is, does this make my life simpler? Simpler is easier later when we build the habits around it. Simpler is usually not easier up front for those of us who have a tough time with structure and a tough time with balancing that and time management, and which is actually priority management and everything else. So I guess the punchline, Karen, is first, let's check in and make sure we're not trying to make it a perfect structure like I was talking with Susie about. No, we're going to embrace structure. It doesn't mean we're going to do it perfectly. We're going to manage interruptions and wasteful distractions, which some days we'll do that better than others. But we'll want to be curious about it, not critical about it. And if we can be more curious about our priorities and less critical about the ones we're not keeping and the ones we're not doing, it can serve us very, very well in understanding that if your life is well structured, like the building I'm in right now, there's going to be a lot of room to breathe, a lot of room to move around. If your house was built like the structure most of you are trying to create in your mind, you'd have a pillar every 2 feet each direction. That wouldn't be a very fun house to live in or move around in or relax in. Be rather claustrophobic. And yet many of you wonder why you're not able to build claustrophobic structure in your life. Well, duh. When you put it in those terms, you kind of go, oh, that's why I'm not doing it. I just never looked at it that way. Okay? So that's a huge piece. All right. We've got another person raising their hand to come on stage on Clubhouse. It is our friend Christopher. Chris, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well. How about you?
Good. What can I do for you today?
Well, I kind of want to go off of the question you just answered, because with structure, since just to explain to the audience, I have Asperger's syndrome, which is on the autistic spectrum, and creating a schedule and all that can be a bit of a struggle for me, since part of it is just needing structure in the first place. Since if one little thing goes wrong, my brain can't help but go basically haywire over it. And sometimes it's almost like I have to press the reboot button just to get myself back on track. And considering what you just said, I was just wondering if you would say anything different for maybe someone on the autistic spectrum like myself that does deal with something like that, or if it would still be the same answer, or if it's, since like the saying goes, one shoe size does not fit all.
Indeed. So my initial reaction to that is yes, I would give a different answer, because most brains are driven to rebel against structure. Yours is more wired to depend on it, on a really like a molecular level. So with that said, there would be a different approach that I would recommend, and that would be, yes, find your patterns, find your schedule, find your things that you can rely on, but understand that the further out it goes, the more risk there is to it being disrupted. So I would recommend that, like a slalom skier who goes around gates, they look like flags. They can't just go straight down the hill. They have to go around these gates as quickly and cleanly as they can. I would recommend, Christopher, just for you to experiment with. And you're going to know yourself better than anybody. That's why you always want to be your best coach. You always want to be your best client. And so with that said, and any good coach is just going to enhance your ability to coach yourself, and going to enhance your ability to be a better client for yourself. So that's a big thing for everybody listening to consider. But with that said, I would recommend that you start experimenting with the threshold of how far out you make plans. And I'm just giving you some arbitrary numbers. Rather than planning your day, maybe you just plan the next 3 hours. And no matter what's happening, an alarm might go off or something, and you're going to spend a little bit of time just checking in with how the plan went. And if it went haywire, to borrow your words, then at the end of that 3-hour period, you've got an anchor to grab onto. Because no matter what happens, you know that at 1 o'clock, you're going to be at this place thinking about these things and writing answers to these questions, for example, and just take a 5-10 minute anchor and then put a plan together for what the next few hours will look like. Not saying you can't plan an entire day. I'm not saying what the specific amount needs to be, but if you're struggling where you're feeling like, okay, I had a plan, it didn't go according to plan, and now I'm paying a huge price for it, let's minimize. I think of the movie The Patriot, Christopher. I'm a big movie guy. Half my brain operates in movie quotes. And he tells his sons, when he's going to go rescue one of his older sons from the redcoats, he says, do you remember how I taught you to shoot? And they said, aim small, miss small. So that would be my recommendation to you, is to, whatever small is for you, to aim small so that you miss small in terms of planning out what could happen. As you've learned and as you have masterfully guided other people in your space to understand, like, it's okay. Like, you don't need to have your brain go haywire and beat yourself up about it. You just need to allow it to complete its own emotional cycle so that it can get back to homeostasis. But if you can plan your day in smaller, and maybe planning a day is great. And maybe there's people or yourself that have been trying to plan the week out. And then when one day goes wrong, now we don't just have to worry about the haywire of that day. We've got to worry about the haywire of the construct of how the entire week was supposed to go. And interestingly enough, Christopher, it's not that far off to what every human being experiences. You just experience it at a very obvious, very direct level consciously. But there are tons of people out there living with an expectation of what this month was supposed to look like. And we're already on the 7th, and they've already bailed on what this month could be because the first 7 days didn't line up with what they want it to be. And they have gone, as you said, haywire. So this isn't just a lesson for someone with Asperger's or someone on the spectrum. It's for anyone to pay attention to aiming small, missing small, so that we can give a little bit more room to being human, even if being human for a time is being haywire, and giving ourselves room to complete that cycle emotionally, whatever it might be. Does that help, Christopher?
Yes. I guess you could say kind of embrace the chaos.
Yeah. I agree with that. The challenge is we don't want to manufacture the chaos. Life will deliver plenty of it. So I agree with what you said. I just want to make sure anyone listening didn't hear, oh, let me go find chaos to embrace. No, it will find you, no problem. Pain, disappointment, anxiety, depression, overwhelm, chaos, disorganization, messiness, it'll find you, no problem. But it is about an embrace in the sense that we're not fighting it. We're not trying to lock it in the closet. We're not trying to run away from it. When it does show up, are we in a position where we're not totally overextended and exposed, which is the aim small, miss small piece, so that when it does get disrupted, which is inevitable, we can manage it just a little bit better. So on that level, yes, I totally agree. Embrace the chaos.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Great question. All right, I'm trying to. Oh, okay. Thank you. Time is up. Got things right after this, so I've got to make sure that I hop off in time rather than looking at the clock. So thank you to my team for that. Thank you for everybody joining us today for this open session. If things were shared, please tag people, share this out in Facebook. If you're listening on Clubhouse and you're not a part of the Habit Finders Clubhouse Club, the club on Clubhouse, please join. Please join the Habit Finders. Follow us. Going to be getting more of our coaches involved with some of their shows and some of their rooms that they're putting on, so that you know when you're in a Habit Finders room, you're able to be with people who understand what we're talking about today in terms of the brain patterns and where we learn these things. So again, we're here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. An incredible opportunity to be able to serve you all, to be able to give insights. Thank you for providing the context and the content and subject matter for today. Look forward to getting back into a rhythm. I think we might do these monthly, like we used to at one time, having these open sessions and then having other topics that they don't come from random. They come from experiences I'm having with my personal clients and the dozens of groups that I coach and other things. So thanks for being here. Thanks for one of your greatest assets, your attention. I super appreciate it. Everybody have a great week and continue to work on unlearning so that you can learn to grow and become more of who you already are. And everybody have a great week. We'll see you next time on Facebook Live and on Clubhouse. Take care.